Fellas, on today's video we are gonna drink some of the normie Kool-Aid and tackle a relatively known setup. This is a Storm brand assassin, using dual Void batteries, Badge of the Brotherhood and a single Call of the Brotherhood. Again, like the recent content, I am not done with the character, but I'm still making this video because I wanna share a preview of the build before any changes I inevitably do to tackle the endgame content. With that out of the way, yes, this is a pretty normie setup, and I can see why. Badge of the Brotherhood is actually pretty bonkers. Increased elusive effect, cooldown of travel skills, and equal amounts of frenzies and power charges is quite the package on a unique item. While the negatives are a bit annoying, they are barely noticeable, especially when zooming through maps, which this guy does just fine. However, the build doesn't really end there, because we are gonna do a couple of rather funky things to the normified setup. Sounds a bit weird, I know, but you'll see what I mean once we get to the gear and trees section. And believe me, we are gonna strive to make things differently to a relatively non-build archetype. Unfortunately, this is not going to come for cheap. We need rather specific gear to make this work, and due to the spices that I chose to marinate this with, you're gonna need an extra chunk of currency to make it work. It'll make sense, and we'll talk about those in a bit in the gears section. Finally, before spoiling more of this character, the life situation is not going to improve much. It is low, and due to the route that we take on the tree, we really cannot do much about it. So if you're not fond of builds with the bare minimum HP, unfortunately this is one of those. Anyways, if you are new around here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, otherwise a rating and a comment are always appreciated. And now let us talk about summer brands, quite literally and figuratively. Alright lads, it's time to rate those stash tabs for normie purposes. As I said in the intro, we are dual wielding Void batteries. These two are gonna quote-unquote hurt or spell damage initially, but the more power charges we get, the lesser the penalty. So we need to maximize those charges for the screen to go boom when we zoom, or something like that. However, if I plan to tackle endgame content, I need to get both ones with the damage penetrates elemental resistances as a corrupted implicit. This is going to net us a massive DPS increase, especially on single target, and that will more than likely happen by the next video. As for the amulet, we are using Badge of the Brotherhood. The elusive effect per power charge, equal number of both power and frenzies, and cooldown of movement skills per frenzy are massive as both offensive and defensive bonuses. Yes, the amulet has some penalties too, but they are barely noticeable. For the time being, I've got Crystal Skin anointed on here, especially since I'm building this character with elemental element avoidance in mind. One of the rings is Call of the Brotherhood, which is going to allow us to pop enemies on kill, while also enabling us to use hypothermia in the gem setup. The helmet needs an extra power charge, as either a corrupted implicit, a warlord prefix, or a synthesized implicit like my case. I want to attempt to cram the crown of the inward eye into this as long as it has a corrupted power charge implicit, but for now this helmet is doing the job just fine. The other ring has Onslaught and Hit as the implicit. Now I am doing this for two reasons. The first one is that Onslaught is freaking fun to have for borderline free. Speed, cast speed and a constant refresh of the buff is too hard to pass up. And second, I am not using Tailwind boots, and these Onslaught rings are far cheaper to acquire than a decent pair of Tailwind boots, especially when you need good mods on the item. So I do recommend getting one here. Hell, I recommend coping one before they become stupid expensive later on in the league. Talking about boots, mine have a crap ton of resistances, life, movement speed and elemental element avoidance chance, which is a shaper modifier. I personally hate elemental elements with a passion, so I try to make my characters immune to that shit, which is why I went this route. The belt is a Stygian Vice with life and resistances, and I am thinking of a Hunter Exile Slam to hopefully get increased maximum life, but we'll see what happens in that regard. Maybe an Iceling on Veil too, but yeah, Stygian Vice, mandatory. The Abyss Jewel on the belt has life, damage to spells and resistances. Unfortunately, the damage to spells is kinda ass on Stormbrand, so if you could get crit multi or cast speed instead, that will be great. The gloves are another Abyss item and they are Command of the Pit, to get Arcane Search for free on spell hits as long as a Hypnotic Eye Jewel is socketed on the gloves, which is the case. I am using these gloves because I am a lazy person and I don't want to trigger Arcane Search through other means, and also because I've got mine corrupted with elemental weakness on hit. Optimally this is the play, but if you cannot get the corruption, you'll need that curse linked to Hex Touch and Hydrosphere. The jewel on the gloves has life, crit multi and cast speed if you've dealt a crit recently. Finally, the body armor is an Awakener or chest, and it has chance to gain a frenzy charge on hit and spell crit, while also having chunky life and chance to avoid elemental ailments crafted on it. Unfortunately, this combination is kinda mandatory. We get 10 maximum frenzy charges thanks to the amulet, so we need a source for those, while also having a spell crit to borderline cap or crit chance, which is pretty nice, but a bit expensive to get going. As for flasks, a quartz, a wise oak, and an Atsiris promise. Surprisingly, bottle fade is not really useful here. It will be if you sacrifice the quartz, but unfortunately the quartz is mandatory, and the reason as to why is related to the skill tree, which we are gonna talk about now. Right now, this is a level 92 assassin. We befriended Alira for the resistances and crit multi, and for Pantheons we bounce between Solaris and Lunaris, while swapping between Tukohama and Shakari depending on the situation. For the Ascendancy itself, power charge generation and bonuses, elusive on crit, and finally single target damage. Now for the skill tree, if you are keen-eyed, you probably saw an unholy decision being made in this character. We are gonna ditch the dodge nodes and that side of the skill tree as a whole. Unfortunately, the cool shit for this build is in the northwest side of the skill tree. This is why we cannot cram those nodes into the build. To compensate for that, we are gonna grab elusive effect nodes near the power charge on the shadow starting area, and further help ourselves by using a quartz flask. But we really gotta play this carefully because stuff hurts, especially when our coin flip defenses have their odds stacked against us. Anyways, the build can be summarized into 4 key goals. Any critical stuff that we can get, including spell crit everywhere and anywhere. All of the power charges and power charge shenanigans. This is also why the skill tree is so limiting. Any life nodes in the way alongside jewel sockets and aura nodes. Also rune binder. And finally a cluster jewel setup. The large cluster jewel has 8 passives at most, with Prismatic Heart and Doriani's Lesson as the mandatory notables. Now the last notable can be whatever, but Thunderstruck gets 10 meme points due to the bosses getting tossed around like ice cubes on a flat surface. 10 out of 10 will absolutely recommend. The medium cluster has Evil Eye to blind cursed enemies and also for a bit of increased damage, alongside Master of Fear to unnerve cursed enemies so that they take increased damage. Finally, for jewels we use a Watcher Sight with reduced mana cost of skills while affected by clarity, alongside extra damage against enemies on consecrated ground while affected by zealotry. The rest of the jewels have increased maximum life, some form of crit multi and cast speed. Hell, maybe even chaos resistance if you are feeling like burning some hard-earned chaos. But yeah, that is it for the skill tree. I know I am lacking brand stuff, especially more active brands. I don't really care about having multiple brands during clear, but I will be investing into a medium cluster with brand loyalty and grand design once I reach level 95. But with all of that said, let's talk about the gem setups. In the body armor, a Storm brand linked to Hypothermia, Divergent Swift brand, Alomalos Inspiration, Awakened added lightning damage and Control Destruction. In the helmet, Flame Dash and Decoy Totem. We link the two of these to Second Wind, but the Decoy Totem also needs multiple totems, so that we can avoid the penalty from Rune Binder. Anyways, in the boots, Wrath and Zealotry linked to Enlighten. Optimally, you also have Clarity in here. That one is currently chilling in my gloves. And finally, in one weapon, Hydrosphere linked to Cooling Strike. If you don't have Elemental Weakness on your gloves, then you need to link Hydrosphere to Hex Touch and Elemental Weakness. Also, I am missing Vaal Righteous Fire and Vaal Haste. They will more than likely be here by the next video. But yeah, that is it for the gems. And now to wrap up this video, so far the character has been a breeze. It maps hard and it's been quite an addictive playstyle. Sure, the build is shaping up to be quite expensive, especially once I get both wands with elemental penetration implicits, but it is going to be required. As you saw, our defenses are severely limited. Depending on a flask and elusive to survive is not really what I'd recommend right now. But unfortunately, if we want dips, we gotta sacrifice some stuff. At the same time, I am greatly lacking in some aspects right now. I need to go harder on some of the gear, which is more than likely going to happen by the next video. But that also implies a bit more currency spending. So yeah, that's gonna be it for me today. I gotta go back to grinding this game and hopefully make a thing or two happen so that we can go even larger on the dips department. Until that happens, don't forget to subscribe, but a rating and a comment are always appreciated. Thank you so much for watching the video. Take care, have a nice weekend, and peace out.